Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. On this episode, Cody Hall, Marine veteran, all those cool things, entrepreneur. I probably like five or six more. World traveler, sweating in the desert guy has joined us. Cody, man, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, I gotta jump into this. Marine recon and now in the medical world. Because for those of you who don't know, Marines do not have medics. That's just one of those Marine things. They got to take them from the Navy. And the Navy doesn't have medics. Technically, they have corpsmen. Yeah, I know, folks. This is crazy talk. It's very confusing. But Cody, how did you go from Force Recon, basically Marine Special Ops, that world, to this medical entrepreneur world? I mean, I know there's a long story, so let's just get a nugget of it. Like, what happened, man?
In the beginning.
In
No.
I was born.
So what happened was should have joined the Navy. I actually had a signed contract for Navy EOD, and I was supposed to go off and do great things and travel the seven seas. And then I was like, man, it's going to take me 9 months to go to boot camp. This is ridiculous. Marine Corps said, come to us. We'll get you gone in 2 weeks. And so what am I going to do? Whatever the Marine Corps needs you to do. And so, so boom, off I went. And so it started off, I probably should have been in the Navy in the first place. But, to make a clear distinction, I am in no way, shape, form, or fashion other than, the combat life-saving classes I've taken, certified in any way to do medical procedures. And so, need an IV? I got you. I can probably stop, trauma, some bleeding, got you. But if you have a headache or something doesn't feel right, you should see a medical practitioner. No, it's an interesting path. I don't know how I got here. It's hard to kind of follow all the dots, but it started off with HR, which also is pretty far away from the Marine Corps. So
yeah, because the Marine Corps, you're just a Marine. There is no HR in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, well, I think it's because I know all the things that you shouldn't do. So the prime, I think in order to navigate rules, you need to know what all the rules are and which ones you should and should not break. And so got an HR and use that as a vehicle to kind of grow through companies. And I realized that HR is a huge opportunity for startups. Because I was just thinking about this yesterday, which is the funny part. I was sitting there, I'm like, I understand how people as entrepreneurs, people who start companies can just forget HR rules and compliance matters because you're so worried on just surviving. And as a CEO with an HR background, it happens to me all the time. I'm like, man, yeah, I can't remember the last time I looked at our handbook, probably when I started the company, right? And who knows what that thing says. And so I think it's just one of those things that I saw HR as an opportunity, right? It's like being a good comm guy, right? You're that, you're made in the shade. You become a good HR guy in a small company and you can get places. And I hopped around in different startups doing that. And that's kind of how I landed in healthcare. I left tech because I just got tired of this idea of trying to figure out how to trap people's money from them. Because that's all application companies are, is how do we get people to download, stay download, and spend more money. And so when that company folded, I waited around for a while, painted my house. And then ironically enough, the Marine Corps is what got me into healthcare because I had a guy call me. He's like, my brother was recon. I was like, do you know him? And so I'm like, where was he? He's like, oh, he was with first, blah, blah, blah. He was there for 27 years. I'm like, what's his name? Sure enough, I mean, is a guy that I didn't know personally, but I had heard of. And then, we ended up getting connected, did an interview, liked the company, and that's how I got in healthcare. So a lot of jumping around to get here, but no direct line whatsoever.
It sounds to me like it was maybe a bit of following opportunity, which started with, well, I want to go in the Navy. Well, you got to wait. Okay. Well, what other options are there? What's the next opportunity? If that's not, and then bang, the next opportunity. And so that's a really interesting thing when you think about it, though, is how do you see opportunities? And that's a really broad question, and I apologize for that.
Yeah.
But do you do you do they pop into your head, or do you see them on the street corner? How about that?
Well, I think that, and when I say this, I don't underestimate or discount the situations that many people find themselves in, as in terms of people who transition out of the Marine Corps and out of all branches. Shout out to Recon Sniper Foundation, it's an organization that does a lot of work to help folks transition. And the challenges, and someone like my partner who knows nothing about the military, she's like, I look at you and I look at others and I see that you're much different. And I was very lucky, is the word I'll say. And I think luck is preparation meeting opportunity, which is getting me back to your question. I have a lot of luck. I just yesterday had someone from Upwork reach out to me about a C-level position, and I get hit up all the time for jumping into executive positions at companies that probably would pay me more than I get paid at my own company right now, and probably have an easier life too. And so I have a lot of opportunity, and it's more so because I've created my environment that fosters opportunity. I put myself in a position to succeed. A lot like many people in the communities that we know, you don't want to fail at all. So you try to create the best future for yourself. And that's just what I've always done. I went to HR generalist role because I didn't want to get specified into a certain part of HR that would close opportunities. I didn't want to overcommit to contracts that would lock me into companies because I don't know what happens 2 years from now. I look back at my life and I've made a lot of solid mistakes personally. I have ex-wives and I have old friends, new friends. But when it comes to my professional work, I just always keep the doors open, and I create an environment that allows me to choose what I want to do. And so, which is all I ever want. All I want is freedom. I don't care about money. I don't care about titles and all that jazz. I just want the opportunity to do what I want to do.
I think, and that's all great, but I could see how in that mindset, you also don't necessarily take the steps for growth. So for those opportunities, was that like a conscious effort of like, you knew you wanted to do more, or is it more you were just like keeping open and, hey, somebody called and you're like, all right, fine, I'll take that job, and just kind of following it as it showed up? Or was it a little bit more conscious of like, here are the goals I want to get to, and this is my path towards it?
Yeah, I never, it's hard to say like what were my goals, right? I knew I was always going to be the CEO of a company, and I knew I started companies before. And so like being an entrepreneur is what I wanted. I think it was more so following the next challenge. So I get bored easily. And so if positions, organizations, they stop challenging me on a daily basis on what I want to be challenged on, I look for the next challenge. So I was more so chasing the fight and less chasing the destination.
I'm
Do
laughing.
you
It's just
build?
reminded me of the great saying we used to always throw out there, running to the sound of gunfire. Matter of fact, I think that's even the Marines have even taken a derivative of that in one of their recruiting commercials, haven't they?
Yeah, I think so.
What I was curious about was, do you work to build some challenges into your work so that you're not like just building up a company and I'm bored with this and jump into the next one? Like, do you actively try to build in some of those challenges?
I try, and I work daily to be better at it. So if I were to look back at every company, you could see some consistent actions that I've taken across all the organizations. And I've done the next better than the last every time. More methodical, more detailed, more strategy based. Like I was just listening to a short cast this morning, the difference between planning and strategy, right? I've made a lot of plans, but as I've gone through years, my plans have been more resemble strategies than just a checklist of things I want to do. And so what's important to me is to be better every time I do something. And so the challenge for me is, great, I'm going to build this company. I'm going to hire this team. How is this team going to be better than this team? Octiva's organization as a culture and a team is far better than any organization I've had before, because I've approached it entirely different, because I've taken all the learns, all the mistakes from the past. And so the challenge to me is just sometimes it's the same overall task: build a company, have the right organization, the right culture, and be successful. But how I go about doing that has definitely improved and become better over time. And so my goal really is to challenge myself for growth, to be a better version of myself.
How did and I think I want you to explain this, the Marines foster that sense of being an entrepreneur? Because I think most people think there's a lot of belief out there for non-military that we're all, lockstep in a box and think the same and do the same. So I'd love for you to tell how your time in the Marines really helped develop the entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I look at it sometimes, and I know this may be a rationalization, but I say, Army and Marines oftentimes are the best entrepreneurs, and then Navy and Air Force are your great corporate, right? And now there's some overlap, some change in there, and it comes down to, what do those two organizations focus on, right? Where are we? What are we doing? And, they're really ground combatant organizations. And so you find yourself with the mentality of a Marine, which is improvise, adapt, and overcome, right? And so it's the idea that we're broke. We don't have anything in the Marine Corps, but we have what the Army gave us.
That's right. The leftover stuff
from Desert Storm. And so we take what we have, and success is the only option. And I think oftentimes, I apply many mentalities from the Marine Corps to the entrepreneurial mindset. And it's just, I suffer from, I don't want to be derogatory. I suffer from get over it syndrome, which I have other ways of saying that. But my mentality is that, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. I could sit here and, oh man, we don't have enough money. We have these challenges. But I suffer from get over it syndrome, which means I just skip right over that process of feeling bad for myself and right into, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to do the best we can, what we have? And I think that mentality, that Marine Corps mentality, the recon mentality, which is like, hey, listen, you're a small team and a small organization with not a whole lot of resources. What are you going to do to succeed and complete the mission? And I think that is an entrepreneur, because, very few organizations have been, from step one, been funded so well that they could just make whatever decision they want from step one. And so, but every small organization starts off with a constraint on resources, time, and really long shot objectives.
I think that's so huge about what you're saying, the get over syndrome and how big that is as an entrepreneur. Because when you get wrapped up around things, it just kills your productivity. And it's like, as stupid as a mistake may have been, or miscalculation, or whatever it is, even if it was completely like you were oblivious to the answer that was right in front of you, made a terrible mistake, you still got to move forward. There's nothing you can do to go back and change that. So the get over it syndrome, I think, is a super effective thing for an entrepreneur, because when it comes down to it, you've got to, we say it all the time with it's our phrase for with the U of A rugby team here. When you have a bad play, flush it, next play, doesn't matter. Like, literally doesn't matter if you just drop the ball, because the ball is going to come to you in about 5 seconds anyway. You better catch that one. That's all that really matters, is the next play. And I think if you get wrapped around that axle of past decisions, it can really drag you down.
Well, I think one thing that at a time when I was in the Marine Corps and I was a younger chap, I had an answer for everything. All right. And I want to be very clear. I still have an answer for everything. And everyone hated me for it, because it was like, why'd you do this? Well, let's talk about why I did this. Let me go through my logic here and tell you step by step. They don't care. Really what it comes down to is, as a leader in a company, it's being responsible for everything the organization does or fails to do. And so regardless, even in the healthcare environment, where I am a small little rubber raft in a rapid river, and I make absolutely zero influence on my environment. My environment is what is going to determine my future. Are they going to approve me of this compliance review? Is this law going to get reviewed? But regardless, if Octiva fails tomorrow, it's my responsibility. It doesn't matter. I can blame everyone in the sun. People are going to ask. And like, what comes down to ultimately my leadership. And did I miss an opportunity to do something better? Did I not execute well on this one opportunity? And it's my burden to carry. And I think having that burden of responsibility is important too. And so that, because we can all sit around and point fingers, but that's just not going to help me out in my next venture. I'm just going to learn to blame someone else for my failures at my next company. So how
have you instilled that the get over it mindset with your team in Octiva? How have you carried that down?
Just said this yesterday, actually. we because
I have spies, by the way. Just
I think maybe I repeat myself. That's part of why I said do so many things yesterday. But the team, I oftentimes tell them, presenting a problem without a solution is complaining, right? And so we're sitting there on a chat group going back and forth and trying to resolve and brainstorm an issue. And someone's just like, we got this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. And I said, great. So what are you proposing we do? Because we're not here to be your therapist. I don't really want to, if you want to vent with me, but please pause, breathe, and then go right into the solution. And that mentality is present throughout the entire organization. I refer to it, and the team refer to it as something other than complaining. However, I don't really stand for it because it's a waste of time. And then it creates this environment where everyone's just sitting around complaining, and then we're doing a lot of talking, but no solving. And oftentimes these things are timely, and especially when it comes down with patient care and, creating a decision that is going to create a precedence for every other client that we have in the future. And so we don't complain. We solve problems. We listen to each other. What's the issue? Identify, adapt, and overcome. Right back into the last one. So the team as a whole understands that, and they understand our constraint on resources and time, and then a clear mission and understanding. I think it's like in the mission planning process. It's like starting off is a clear articulation of what is the mission. Our mission is to confirm or deny. Our mission is to seek and destroy, right? Our mission is to, become profitable. And how do we become profitable? It's by having the right mixture of resources and revenue, one not to exceed the other, so that we can be here a year from now, 2 years from now.
How do you build that into the culture? Because I could see how, being in the room with you, I can see how that plays out. But, as your company grows, I don't know the size of Octiva, to be fair, off the top of my head, but as it grows, you're going to get more and more where you're not in that room. And maybe you get a couple people in the room who do like complaining, and they kind of want to build that cycle back up.
And we have complainers. I have to say, as a Marine, I'm a professional complainer. All right.
They teach you that at boot.
They teach. It's like, here are our 3 founding principles: honest, courage, commitment. Also, the 4th and non-said is complainers. And so, right. And so a good complaint is a good complaint. No, it's pushed down through my hires. And so when I started the organization and I brought on my COO, who wasn't my COO at the time, we're talking about a mom of 5, right? Short little lady out of Texas, told her entire life she can't be anything. Now she's a doctor, a nurse practitioner. She has 5 children, runs a team. I don't know how this woman even sleeps. And so, she's tougher than I am, right? So, probably shoots an AR-15 better than I do too. But she, that mentality takes down to the nurse teams. And as you get down there, we have different personalities. We have people who prefer complaining more than they prefer solutions, people who are more emotional than they are logic. And we can't all be the same, but I have no desire to ever want to be the same. We have a great mixture of people who have all their different strengths. I'm very logical, very numbers based, and this is the facts, and this is what we're going to do. And then we have people on the far left being like, well, this is how I feel. And we all meet in the middle somewhere. But it's having the right leaders in place that guide those expectations. And because we do have people the sheep who get out to the right, we have to pull them back in, right? We have to tell them at times, and I think honesty is the best medicine. Things like this aren't allowed on our team, right? We don't have time or the resources to waste on this mentality or process. And so we either get with it or get going. And, and I enjoy and I love so many people on my team. Personally, I know them. However, they also understand that I have a commitment to mission, which is not to be interfered with. And the only thing I care about at the end of the day is I think we have 15 employees at Octiva in whole. I think we have 34 kids, children across the organization, parents across everywhere. And the thing is we have kids, things happen. Kids going to ER, getting sick. And I absorb those situations as well as we can, because all I care about is did you achieve what needed to be achieved when it needed to be achieved? Because if you did that, I don't care that you had to take 2 days off to go to ED. Take care of your child. And that is known throughout the organization. I have a commitment to results, and people have come and people have gone because of that. And it's no hard feelings. It's just they know exactly where I stand.
I want to jump into, because I have this gut feeling that there is a process there for finding the right fit for the team that is repeatable for other entrepreneurs. So I'd love to, just, you don't have to get into super detail unless you want to, but just how do you find that team member that fits into the culture and sustains it and even grows the culture in the right direction?
Just for the sake of connecting dots over and over again, we're going to go back to the military. All right, we're going to go to selection and think about what the first thing they do to you. Well, they try to beat it out of you. It's like, does this person want to be here? We're going to try to drown them, freeze them, and sleep deprive them until they quit. Do they want to be here? And so going into every one of my interviews, especially for my high level leaders, I go in and I'm very honest with them day one. Like, this is where we stand. This is a startup. I'm telling you, I love work-life balance when it's available. All right. I can tell you I'm not going to pay you the most, and I can't tell you when you're going to get a pay increase. All right. And I go through that. I tell them the realities of where I stand. And I tell them the realities of me as the person who's going to lead them. And I think those are things that I jump right into where the contention is going to be, where oftentimes you're going to lose people. And so that way, the type of personality you're working with and the type of environment you're working with. So now I'm either I'm going to weed out everyone, which it happens really quick. I've done a lot of interviews. And I usually do this on group interviews. I have a group interview today with 20 sales folks. And the first thing I'll do to them is tell them how much I'm not going to pay them and how difficult the job's going to be. And it weeds out people really quick. And who's left standing? It's the hard people. It's the people seeking the challenge. It's the people running towards the gunfire. And it's the ones that sit there. And that's how I got LaShonda Phillips. LaShonda, her husband, was a successful entrepreneur who had the opportunity to sell his organization to Amazon. And then she's like, I want that challenge. And so this mother of 5 who achieved all her education as a mother is now part of a startup, which if without her would not be a success. If I'm the commander, she is my chief non-commissioned officer, and I need her for everything. And so that's how I weed them out. I'm honest from day one, and I don't take the weight off of them at no point. They understand the severity and what's at stake.
Do you think, maybe this is a little bit of a joke here, but if you didn't have your HR background, do you think that implementation would look a little different? Because I'm almost picturing the weekend out there, hey, you guys are going to swim this many laps. We're going to throw some weight vest on you while you're in the pool, whatever that may be looking like. Do you think you had that HR advantage to take that lesson and apply it in a way that, makes sense in the civilian world?
It's very interesting too, because not a lot of CEOs have an HR background. Most CEOs come from a marketing background. And I think that as the organization, what has saved me a lot of pain is turnover not being a big issue, because I retain a lot of employees. Natural attrition happens, people going back to school and things like that. But being an HR person, with my experience, has given me an opportunity to create an environment for myself that I can control. And it's like the hiring processes. And so knowing people has made people not an issue for me. Knowing HR has made HR not an issue for me, which are sometimes things that plague startups. Every startup I've ever been at before, and when I was in charge of HR and things like that, attrition is out of control. Culture is out of control. I've been at startups where keg stands are a normal Wednesday thing, right? And so you're sitting there like, we are going to get sued. So, right, and we are going to be the next Uber. And so, but in those things, they're not an issue. And we have our missteps, and I'm not perfect. And sometimes I say things that come to my mind that I look back on, I'm like, man, that wasn't really the best HR approach to that, Cody. However, sometimes we are human.
So where I detect something that you said, and I'm wondering how you you restrain it. That's the way I'm going to put this, because you taste opportunity and challenge, but one of the key things that can be a success or failure of a startup is that next shiny object, that, ooh, well, what if we added this capability? What if we did this? What if we solve this for everybody? The niche sort of thing. If we can help everybody, right?
We were there.
We do that at Tribe and Purpose. We were like, no, come to us. I don't care what you do. Well, we find ourselves doing that also. So how are you, with this love for, that next opportunity, that next challenge, how are you restraining that to where, because obviously you've made it this far, there's some focus there.
I'll answer that in two ways, personally and then on the organization side.
Mm-hmm.
On the organization side, when we started off Octiva, I lit every candle that was given to me, every opportunity. All right. And I said, well, let's see how bright this thing shines. And so right now I sit with 4 candles remaining. We have virtual bridge programs where we transition patients from hospital. We have an after hours program for clinics and primary cares in the community. And then I have intensivist support in hospitals and psychiatry support in hospitals. The psychiatry and the intensivists are very dim candles, right? They may burn for a really long time and create revenue for a really long time, but they'll probably never grow, because our biggest 2 candles, the ones remaining, are the ones that I'm like, these are the ones we're focusing on. But at first it was like, what do you need me to do? Is it healthcare related, virtual related? We're your person. We'll do it. And so, yeah, and there is that, one of my board members, Gray's like, how are you going to, he'd always say, how are you going to stay focused on what you want to achieve? And you got all these things coming at you. I'm like, good question. I don't know the answer. But now it's just time. It's running the race. Who's going to be there at the end of the race? It's the people who keep putting their feet in front of the other feet, one after another. And so with that mentality, things kind of weed themselves out, but it's sticking it out that's going to get you there. And I think that's the same thing with me as a leader of Octiva and the founder of Octiva. I've had many opportunities, many different organizations reach out to me to lead them, to be a part of them. And there's points in times where, the interest was a little bit of a spark inside me. I'm like, what? I have been here for about 2 years now, going on 3 years now. Maybe I should look at something else. But my job here is not done. The thing is with Octiva, we have a mission to achieve, and it's one that needs to be played out. And I owe it to many people. I owe it to the very close connection I have to my board members, how I know many personally. I owe it to my investors who've entrusted me with their hard-earned money that they've had to sweat, blood, and tears for. And then I owe it to my team. And so there's one thing that I don't do is I don't fail myself, and I definitely don't fail other people. And so I have too many people relying on me, which is why I'm able to drown out that little shiny object that comes every now and then that says, do you want to be the C something O of this publicly traded company? You're like, well, that does sound like it'd be an easy job compared to what I do on a daily basis, every day of the week. But it's my commitment to others. That's what keeps me driving the mission. Even, we've had a long year at Octiva, long 2 years at Octiva. Last year we had a money constraint, then we did a raise, and then we had less money issues and more just like, so are our partners going to approve these contracts or not? And so I'm over here growing a beard, waiting for them to, well, physically and actually, metaphorically, waiting for them to sign these contracts. And so, it's like it's like that sniper game. I'm sitting in a bush, just waiting for that one shot and hoping that it comes. And so, we're doing everything that we can to do, but it's commitment to others that definitely keeps me focused on Octiva.
How did you define your mission? Was this something where you saw the problems beforehand and you were like, I want to go solve those? You had your own experiences. Or was this something where you were kind of coming in from that outside perspective, and then once you were in it, you saw these different opportunities around you?
Yeah, I think the one thing I say oftentimes, and I didn't come up with it, but I still shamelessly from others, is that it's easy to find the issues in healthcare. It's the hard part solving them. All right. And so I was working at Titanium Healthcare for a gentleman named Gray Miller. He started an organization to really start bridging some of the inequalities and the approach to healthcare that just wasn't working, right? They wanted to do healthcare differently. When I was a part of the organization, I saw that there are a lot of what we refer to as social determinants of health, basically your impact of money, environment on your health, the social side. And what I saw is a lot of it comes down to either not having access, meaning not having a car, not having the information to get you places or get you to an understanding of how to approach your own healthcare. And so that's kind of how the mission of Octiva came about. And we use a biopsychosocial model. So bio being medical, social being social impact, money, and then, you know, the psych piece being behavioral approach to bridging these social barriers that people face and medical barriers that people face with telehealth. By why drive somewhere to talk to a doctor when you can do a video chat? Why be restricted to trying to Google and navigate what you need to look up when you have a resource center that knows exactly where they need to go, exactly what they need to find? And then we have back doors with things that get you cheaper medication, get you medication rerouted to the right pharmacy. And so we're able to combat the low-hanging fruit, which oftentimes is the biggest barriers to people's successes. So that's how I saw these things that could be bridged with technology, and it says we can bridge these bridges virtually. And that's kind of how we got into our mission Octiva.
One thing we've talked about before on the show around creativity and like problem solving is that a lot of the time you get either this like explosive problem solving from somebody who's new to an area versus you get the incremental problem solving for somebody who's been there a long time. Would you agree with that? Like, does your outside perspective help to bring a little bit more of that explosive creativity rather than making those slight changes?
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit of both. It was explosive in the beginning, but I think my tenureship in healthcare allows me to continue the incremental innovation. And so at first it was like, oh my God, isn't everyone in healthcare stupid? Right? Why are we doing things this way? The short answer is yes, and the other answer is no. And the thing is healthcare is victims to itself. It's a victim to its own ways sometimes. And so getting in and being different in healthcare is oftentimes, the nail that sticks out gets the hammer. That's healthcare. If you're too far out of the wood, you'll probably get corrected and pushed away. And so you have to understand getting into healthcare, you don't want to be a disruptor, right? You need to figure out how can I encourage change with not encouraging discomfort. And that's healthcare. You want to change without making people feel like they're becoming irrelevant, like you're trying to change everything they know. It's like the military, Reconnosaurus Rexes, right? The old people in the military, this is the way we've always done it. And that's why you're going to climb up this mountain with this heavy log, right? And so, and that's the mentality of healthcare. This is the way we've always done it. And so it doesn't like change. It's not really adapt to innovation. And that's where my incremental side comes in. I know healthcare well enough now where I know that they're going to be accepting of this, or maybe we should water this down a little bit and start playing a long-term plan. But the biggest issue with things like that in Octiva is like, how do you encourage change that's going to make you profitable before you run out of money? And so, and Octiva is a very innovative organization. What we do is a little different, right? For our hospital partners, Hospitals don't like change. And so they have their money-making machine and they know exactly what works and that's what they want to do. And so when you come in and you do things different, even though you're going to make them more money, save them more money, it's hard sometimes to see outside of the box we've always known. And that's healthcare. And I think that's the thing I encourage is the openness to innovation and incrementally pushing people that direction versus shoving them into a corner.
Yeah.
Do you think...
I was just going to say,
one more, Dad. I got it. So do you think that you said the victims to themselves do you think that's because it's a large industry that's old and built on itself? Because the other examples you used was military. I thought to a conversation I've had with people in the agriculture industry, or do you think the resistance to change is a little bit more having to do with the type of people that come into the industry, and then therefore they might not have the business acumen to look for those kind of changes? Or which one do you think it is there?
Well, I think it's just the fact that the system is like, I look at it like Microsoft, the operating system. It's built on a DOS platform that they purchased in the early 90s or 80s. And what they really did is they just kept layering it on top of each other. And they didn't really change anything. They're just incrementally changing the layers, right? But really, at the very core of it, it's the same kind of system. And that's healthcare. Healthcare in the United States is like, okay, this is what we have. All right, we're going to fix it by putting this new layer on top of it. Great idea. Oh, sweet layer. No, that layer's not working. This layer, this layer, this layer, this layer. And the issue is now we have all these layers, and all I tell you, I know healthcare fairly well, but I get confused sometimes with all these directions that where the money's going, who's managing the patient, who's not managing the patient. And you look at a DOFR, for example, which is a list of duties and responsibilities for who's paying what. Like, well, this entity pays for the psych inpatient, but they don't pay for the psych outpatient medication. And so it's like all these strings, and you're like, well, how the hell did we get here? Right. Mm-hmm. And, the one payer system, I am not in the business of encouraging socialized healthcare. However, I will say one thing they did do well is it's simple, right? You have one payer and you have the customer, the patients, right? And so I'm not saying that's where we need to go, but Octiva is built off of a one payer strategy, which is the idea that, patients should come to Octiva, the ones we support, before we send them out to the disposition of the different levels of care they receive. And so it's built on that system. And I think simplicity is the best thing. But when I say that it's a victim of its own self, it's because it's so complicated and they're just putting a new layer on top of a new layer. They're really not trying to fix the system. They're trying to patch it.
Let's see. I was mesmerized by that. So I've kind of bring it back to what I was thinking, because you mentioned strategy. So here's my segue. Does it count as a segue if I call it a segue? I've always wondered that. If I call out that I'm doing a segue while I'm doing a segue. But you mentioned strategy, and what I'd love to know, because this is so different from the military, is as you're growing, because you're at 15, I think you said, that's starting to get to think, okay, well, who's the next squad leader I need to bring into the platoon? Who's the platoon sergeant that I need as we grow next? How are you setting that up as the architect of Octiva, that person with the vision? How are you setting that up for next stage?
And I think that since we keep bringing the correlations in the military, squad leaders, platoon leaders, they are the backbone. They say the non-commissioned officer is the backbone of the Marine Corps, right? Mm-hmm. Middle management is the backbone of organizations. And I lost sleep over this week. And I sat there and I think about little things that my leaders do. And I think about how it is telling of who they are and how they make decisions. And so, our organization is going through changes right now. We're on the fence where we have an opportunity for contracts. I'm waiting for good news back today. Fingers crossed.
Yep.
Where what side of the fence we're going to fall on. And so one direction makes my issue, well, great. We have revenue, but now I have who's going to be the leader of these things, right? Because and the question is, do I have those people on board right now? Do I need to search for those people? And then people, they underestimate what that does to a team when you bring in an outside leader. However, you can't promote someone internally because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And so, when I think about those things, they're constant things that go through my mind in every meeting, every email, every decision I see my leaders make. And I'm asking myself, can they be the person I need them to be? And my COO right now is out on a leave of absence, right? Because, she has children that she has to take care of. And so I ask myself, are things going to get busier before she can return? So do I need to find a new COO? Because that's the contingencies of long periods of leave. If the company needs change while you're gone, you could be a victim to that change. And so, we're in this interesting place right now where the organization could take a culture shift, take a leadership shift, but it's something that is always present in my mind. And it's something I watch constantly on how people behave. And I wonder, can they be the person I need them to be? And then I have to say, when I make that decision, because I've made decisions in my head already, the question is when do I act upon it? Too soon? and you may lose that person that you're leaning on. They may not be your leg, but they could be your cane right now. It's better to have a cane than with nothing at all. And then versus being able to make the decision timely. So it goes from being able to identify what the problem is and then identifying when to act, right? And it's being able to launch that attack at the right time, that strategy at the right time. So I would worry anyone who had preview to the things that go in my mind on a daily basis, but they're constant and they're flowing in every direction. So it's internal, it's external. So I'm both COO right now and CEO. And so I have a very, very busy life.
Yeah. Well, something I had never thought of, you kind of triggered as you were talking about that. The guys that we would promote within in the military, that guy who was, maybe the intel sergeant on the team that gets promoted to team sergeant, or the real good one, the guy who went to the warrant officer course and came back to the same team, or even more, the NCO who went to OCS, became an officer and came back to that same organization. I always saw them struggle to succeed because the rank on the collar may change, and the rank may mean that they're the ones in charge.
Yeah. But
they're still in that same organization and that same culture and that same environment when they weren't the guy in charge. And I just thought of that because some corporations, tout as a benefit of the corporation that they always promote from within. But that's not always the best thing, because of what I just described that happens in the military. The organization that does the most to train its leaders, I've watched guys fail as a leader because we pinned the rank on them and kept them in that same environment, and they were unable to switch. And I as a comment, but I also am curious in your perspective, post-Marine time is what have you seen work or not work, both in Octiva and your other career areas or other jobs?
Yeah, I've seen many examples of the internal, the external benefits and consequences. I think the biggest thing that comes down to it is you shouldn't promote a person based off how well they do their current role. And I think that's what it comes down in the Marine Corps and military as a whole. Is I'm going to promote this guy because he's a great Lance Corporal, or I'm going to promote this guy because he's a great PT stud. Okay, we've seen it all. I'm not going to promote, I'm not going to make a salesperson a sales leader because they're a great salesman, right? And it's being able to separate out what it is you like about them, what they're doing well now, and what it is you need them to do well. And I've seen companies internally over promote, right? And put people who, from supervisors to directors, who are sitting there thinking, well, they were okay supervisors. What in the hell do you think they were going to be a good director for, right? What made you think that? And that's the thing that is the challenge. People could be great at their role. They could be great for the company where they're at. And they themselves sometimes are fixated in their own growth, can't understand why you make the decisions you make. And I tell people all the time, I make business decisions, not people decisions. And, I love to make decisions that benefited every person in the organization, but I'm charged with the responsibility of every decision I make is going to have threefold impact. It's going to have one on revenue, one on cost, and one on people, right? And I have to sit there and balance the best of every world. Are we making profit? How much are we spending? And how's our culture doing? And so that's the thing, is everyone else has this really narrow wake that they're creating, and every stone I throw, it's a 360 wake, and it impacts the entire business. And I think that's the complicated thing when you're looking at a person to promote them or not. It's asking not what they're doing now, it's what do you like about them now, and what do you think they're going to do in this new role you're trying to put them in. And oftentimes, if that's what you do, you're probably not going to promote that person. Because if you really analyze it and then sandbox all the little pieces, you'll figure out what it is you like about them and why they're great in the role they're at, and probably why you should keep them there.
a little bit of a different area there, but it makes me think of a study I heard about the other day looking at nepotism inside of companies. And basically, if you if you replace yourself with your son, or going through that path, like what are the outcomes?
Hey,
And
replace
statistically,
myself with my son. What do you?
I'm not making a pitch if you hear the rest of the stats, don't worry. But the children of the CEOs statistically did worse than the rest of the CEOs, if you measure it on average across industries and that kind of stuff. And one of the super interesting facts, if you go by country for that, was that Japan actually scored about, so I think on average it was about, nepotism was about 10% less than the average rate of growth for a company, whereas in Japan I think it was about 15% above. It was an improvement. But the interesting thing culturally there is there's this habit of CEOs adopting basically somebody inside their workforce so they could keep it inside the family. But it's that same kind of process you're talking about, Cody, of like you're bringing someone up for that role, not because you think they're good at what they're doing now, but they're literally adopting someone inside of their organization because they're like, this is going to be the next CEO. So they wind up doing a lot better there. But I know nepotism versus hiring internally, a little bit different there, hiring inside the family versus hiring inside the company. But I think that just kind of paints that picture of the person you think might be good for a job, the person you're setting up for the job isn't necessarily going to be the right one. And it takes those thought experiments you're talking about, Cody, of changing that perspective and seeing, are they actually going to be good at this job? Because just them being good at their job before does not mean they're going to do well. And that can have catastrophic effects on your company.
I agree.
Yeah, well, I'll just throw in that's interesting.
I just got myself fired, didn't I? No.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that they do that in Japan, because you know what it made me think of is Roman emperors. Roman emperors,
Yeah.
There's several of them who would adopt some. Marcus Aurelius is a great example. That's probably the most familiar. Would adopt a son to become not their blood, to pass down in their blood, and that traditional monarchy belief that we all have from the Middle Ages in England and France. But in that this guy, I see potential in this guy as a teenager, and they literally adopt him to pass on the throne to him. So that's interesting that the Japanese have adopted a similar thing. I'm curious.
Like Tim Cook.
Huh?
It's like Tim Cook and at Apple. So he was brought under the wing very young. So
yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting thing. Have you started? Because one of my clients, we've done that for him, and how and what he's looking at in those next C-suite roles, so that he moves out of that. Have you started to think towards that? Not just within the team and growth within the team, but who is that next? Chief productivity officer, chief revenue, CXO for you. You start to think that way?
Yeah, I think about I think about how replacing myself will go. Because I myself, who knows, Octiva could be acquired and absorbed by a larger group and become a department of someone, or it could hit a different phase where it needs a different leader. And then I'm not the right leader for the organization. I think that I'm well suited to about the 5th year, and depending on how revenue and things grow, we'll see. That's like my own projected timeline. And maybe I need someone from the outside to come in with a different thought approach. I say, great, Cody started the mold. All right, now I'm going to industrialize this and make it a large organization. Maybe that person's out there. Maybe that's the path we'll take. In terms of people inside the organization, I have thought processes of people in the organization and people outside the organization who I'd like to come in as C-level organizational leaders. And it's time. It's saying, will my thought be correct? Will I end up hitting that crossroad that I'm projecting, where that person outside the organization would be perfect for this role? Is that person that I'm watching internally going to become that chief that I want them to be, that I need them to be internally? Or am I going to have to hire that chief who I don't know exists somewhere in the world? And so I think about that all the time. I think succession planning is something that's very important. And oftentimes, people are doing it only one way. They're bringing in from outside, or they're cultivating only from in. I'm open across the board. I'm thinking in many different directions of how the organization is going to find its next level of success. And then, of course, not disregarding the fact that I have to get there first.
Do you, looking at your own skill set, do you look at yourself as more of that entrepreneur versus the CEO? I kind of heard you say it, like maybe somebody else needs to come in for a different set of problems. Do you think you're more, your skill set is more set for that early time of the business? Or what do you think?
Definitely. I have no desire to be a publicly traded CEO. I like my privacy.
Very different job.
Very different job. And the biggest thing comes down to is I enjoy creating, right? And I think at certain points of the organization, when the organization has its own created momentum and it has existing inertia and everything it does, it's moving forward. At those stages, you have to bring in someone who says, how do we take what is and make it something that's better? I'm in a creative phase. And so I wouldn't hire me to come in and take the organization public. I would hire me to come in and say, okay, great. How do we take these millions of dollars and make them billions? That's a different leader, and that's okay. If my time sunsets the organization because I get it to where it needs to go, where I believe my job is to get the organization to just beyond cash flow, where it's getting itself into a mid-sized organization. Maybe we have 100, maybe we have 200 employees. Maybe we're doing 30, maybe we're doing $40 million in revenue. That's where I believe we should go. And at that point in time, we definitely do need someone else coming along.
That's awesome. That's a great self-realization. Not many people have that kind of clarity, which leads me to thinking about, one of the things I heard you say in my "What Did I Learn," which I thought was really interesting as a reminder for everybody out there that as a CEO, your client isn't the guy who's actually buying the product. Your client are the people on the teams, your investors, your board members, and helping and taking care of them and taking care of the team so that the team can actually take care of your client and the business can grow. But your job as a CEO, your client as a CEO are those people. And I think that's a great reminder for folks because, we've touched on it a few times. You're beyond that initial, I'm doing everything CEO, startup where, I've got an idea and let's do a business, and you look around and, you are the team, to where you actually have a team that you have to take care of, and you have investors that you have to take care of, and board of advisors that you have to take care of and keep them engaged so that you can continue to grow. So I thought that's a real good reminder for me and frankly, other CEOs of businesses out there. So Camden, what'd you learn?
I'm going to keep it simple today. I didn't know that Marines don't have medics. I think that was the first thing you said in your intro. I learned something. There we go.
That's right. So where do they get their medical care from? Did you remember that part?
Guys from the Navy, but they're not called medics. They're called some other word that I'll forget because it doesn't pertain to my life at all.
Pretty good though. Pretty good. Considering your grandfather was a Marine, I mean, that's pretty good. He's proud of you right now. You remember?
There we go.
Cody, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
Oh, well, I mean, I think in discussing my own thought processes and speaking out loud, I think that one thing I realized in this conversation is that I'm never done growing and I'm never without fault. And so I think that, when I speak out loud and I say my thoughts, I oftentimes bounce between my two ears. They become more real. And so I think when I review the shiny object conversation and think about how do I make myself better, not only company to company, but day to day, how am I going to be a better CEO for Octiva today, a better leader for Octiva today than I was yesterday, the week before yesterday. And so I look back at from the time I started Octiva in 2020, and I'm a much different CEO than I was then. And I hope in 2 years from now, I'll be a much different CEO.
Oh yeah. That's awesome. I appreciate that. How do folks get in touch with you, learn more about Octiva, follow you, those sort of things?
We have a very simple website at octivahealthcare.com. And then, of course, we're on LinkedIn, which is our most active social media. You can find me at LinkedIn.com/CODHAL. And then, of course, Octiva Healthcare has its own page as well. So I post updates. I'm fairly active, and so does Octiva.
That's awesome. Hey, Cody, man, we really appreciate your time today and sharing with us and being open for some of those tough questions, because I think we threw some good ones out there.
I agree.
If I do say so myself.
No, gentlemen, thank you.
All right, Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to the Cam and Otis Show, and a special thanks to our guest, Cody Hall, for joining us today. And of course, our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. Get started for free today at findyourpurpose.coach. Make sure to follow the Cam and Otis Show on Instagram and Facebook, and please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Videos of the podcast are on our YouTube page, and you can always get a full archive of our episodes at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.